This is the Miami Minute, where we cover my favorite team, the Miami Dolphins. So, there's a report going around that disgruntled wide receiver Tyreek Hill could be traded. We've been over this. We've been back and forth. He's going to get traded. He's not going to get traded. Oh, maybe he is again. We talked about how the Chargers could potentially be a good landing spot for them. I've seen people say like Buffalo. That would be insane for the Dolphins to trade him to Buffalo. I guess it's not impossible, but it'd be a very Buffalo Bills move in terms of like they're always trading with the Chiefs. So are the Dolphins like the Bills from that point of view? I guess we'll see. So the big thing is they need to find a team that's going to take half of his salary at least, if not all of it, right? Tyreek Hill has a major cap hit coming down the pipe this year. The rest of his contracts not too appealing if you believe that this past season was an aberration and is more of like a 31-year-old player slowing down, right? Which I think, if you want to argue that that's the case, I think it would be hard to argue against. Um, the bigger thing for me with Tyreek Hill is that he quit on the team at the end of the season. And then the biggest thing with him is he just doesn't really show up in these really big games for the Miami Dolphins. And that's frustrating because, you want a player like him who's as talented as him, who was voted number one player in the NFL the year, the last time they did that last year, to show up in some of these big games when he's dropping passes, he's pulling himself out of games. He's a non-factor in a lot of them. He's fumbling against his old team, the Chiefs, to allow them to run it back for a touchdown. It's been, you know, quite disappointing from that aspect. Obviously, he's been in other ways extremely impressive. So we'll see what happens there. Like I said in the intro, or if you're watching, this is the last segment, its own segment. I think I am done talking about Tyreek Hill until something big happens. Until one, he does or says something big, or he actually gets traded, because this back and forth, well, I guess it's good from one sense of like people will view more videos on the topic. It's just like, okay, who cares what's going to happen? So speaking of another Dolphin player who might be on the move, Jevon Holland, he is a free agent. He came into the league and played great. It seemed like he was going to be a star. He certainly played like he was a star in the making. And then last year on Black Friday, not this past Black Friday, but the Black Friday before, against the Jets, he has an interception and he sprains both of his knees, and he just has never really been the same since. So on his podcast, Breaking House Rules, he talked about how he feels like the Dolphins have moved on from him already. And this is from his podcast, quote, "Transparently, seeing the Dolphins post things like the Valentine's Day stuff or like any kind of edit and things like that, you can see guys that may or may not be there next year, or maybe somewhere else, are just not into it, are just not in it. I'm following them on Instagram, right? And I'm not in none of those expletives no more. I'm like, okay, they've kind of moved on. I get it. I understand the decision to do that because I would do the same thing if I was in that position. But from my perspective, I'm just watching it like, I get it, but like, okay, this is the effects of being a free agent. Your team, or what was your team, starts to phase you out in a way. So I think, it's unfortunate, but I do think that Jevon Holland wants more money than the Dolphins are willing to give him, given the fact that he had such a lackluster season this last season. I think he could have gotten a huge contract if he returned to form this season, but just quite frankly, he didn't. So I think that makes the Dolphins hesitant. But, obviously, from his point of view, he wants to maximize his value. So I can't blame him for being like, no, I think I'm worth this much. I can't blame the Dolphins for disagreeing. So what are your thoughts on both Tyreek Hill, potentially getting traded if they can find somebody to take on his salary, and on Jevon Holland feeling like he's not going to be part of the Miami Dolphins going forward? Do you believe Jevon Holland's going to be part of the Dolphins going forward? Or are you like me and kind of like convinced more or less that this era for the Dolphins is coming to a close? Unfortunate. He was a great player before the injury, but It is what it is. Football's a tough game. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.